Probably.
Yeah, let's get it going. All right. Let me know when everyone can see what I be at. And let me mirror that. Okay, got it.
You all will have to click on Hermit's name and click join stream if you want to watch it here.
All right. So I'll give everyone the count of 10, 9, 4, done. Okay. Thanks, Andy. My name is Brian Morick, or else go by Hermit. And currently I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Westinghouse Electric. I co-founded with another gentleman who's on this now, Ridgeback, a hacking group called Cryptolingus about 10 years ago. Used to be in DFW, now in the Pittsburgh area. And I miss y'all very terribly for those who are still in DFW, and for those who are in Pittsburgh, come meet me. Love to get started once we get past this whole minor pandemic thing.
We
So,
miss you too.
thanks, Boo. Uh, yeah, probably about 25 years ago, I got into woodworking, and it's always something I've kind of kept up in the background, but I didn't really have the space to do it when I was living in Dallas. So one of the great things about Pittsburgh is you can get a good chunk of land for a cheap price. So I've now converted my garage into a full wood shop again, and I'm getting back in the swing of things. So I figured today I'd do a quick talk about how you can get into woodworking as well. So the first thing is, why get into woodworking? And first and foremost, it's the original maker community. I'll challenge anybody to go over the more original maker group than woodworkers. As far back as people found trees laying around, they've been converting them into things. There's just something satisfying about creating something that actually functions. It's the same thing you get from electronics tinkering, and I've been done more than my fair share of that and been guilty. But that first time you make a piece of furniture that actually works, or you join a couple of pieces of wood together in a unique way that looks cool, it's just awesome. And then of course there's the IKEA and Wayfairs of the world that are just crushing you to extinction because everything looks the same, and even when it doesn't look the same, it still somehow looks the same. When you're making your own, you can create anything you want to, and it feels fantastic, and you get some really unique conversation pieces. You can take all that. Yeah, generally speaking. I guess that kind of depends how much you practice, but overall, it can be. You convert your time to save money. So as you're going through and you're just looking around saying like, man, I've just got not enough money and way too much time, you can flip that dynamic around and have something that's truly heirloom quality. And of course, it's a key part of your post-apocalyptic survivability. So when the zombies come, you're going to need some of these things to be able to keep them out of your house. So I decided to keep this talk very simply to just what are the key things you can buy. And for each one, I've just gone through, and this is a top to bottom in terms of what things are most important to own. So I went with the four classic categories of bangers, spinners, cutters, and holders. On the banger side, I'm assuming everyone has a hammer. If you don't, you probably should. And a mallet to knock things together without knocking them apart. Nail gun is a nice to add, but not necessary for most things. On the spinner side, things that spin around, screwdrivers, again, I really hope you have them. If you don't, spend the $10. They're well worth it. A drill when you don't feel like using your hand and twisting your muscles out of torque. And sockets are just generally used for most things you come across. On the cutting side of things, the one that I recommend everyone have is the crosscut miter saw. It's the reddish thing on the breakout there. Crosscut miter saw makes it stupidly easy to make a straight square cut, and really that's 95% of what you're going to be doing. The fancier they get, the more they slide out and spin and do angles and everything else. But it's very basic form. You can make a straight square cut. And yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think your presentation isn't.
If it is, it's showing on a different screen.
It's
What?
just the intro working. Because I think you're in full screen.
Yeah.
Here we go. It didn't like, it wasn't showing the full screen, it was showing the other.
Okay, so what are you seeing right now? Which screen?
Now we see what tools to buy.
Are
Well,
you seeing the presenter view or the presentation view? Okay. So
Oh goodness.
I haven't touched anything.
Oh my. I'd recommend sharing your screen personally.
It's toggling back and forth.
All right. Good times. Let me go back and swap
Seizure
that over
alert.
then.
Okay, now we're on PowerPoint, seeing your slides on the previous and next slides on the left.
All right. I'll go to my primary screen and call it done. All right.
It just doesn't know how to show the full screen.
Ooh, fancy. I like that.
Now we see the app. Oh, wait.
Oh.
Whoa.
Anyways. All right. Let me flip that over.
Perfect.
Yay.
Okay. Yes.
Thank
This is
you.
why I've gone back to woodworking, because I've lost all technical skills since resuming being a CISO. So yeah, that sort of red tool is the crosscut miter saw. It's again just hugely useful for making square cuts, and if you can make a square cut, you can do almost anything. Bandsaw is for making curvy cuts in bigger pieces of wood, if you want to get a little fancier, and a scroll saw is for making curving and also very artistic cuts that you can punch through and do in the middle pieces of wood, but you have some restrictions on how big it can be. On the holder side, vices, clamps, pliers, and wood glue. Need all of them, buy all of them, and when you get clamps, you'll be surprised how much they cost, but that's because they're worth it. There's one last tool that everyone absolutely 100% has to have in their wheelhouse, and it's this, which is a combination square. Gives you a 45-degree angle, measurement in both inches and metric systems, generally speaking. 90-degree square, the ability to go across a piece of wood and back and forth, and a level all built into one glorious tool. And they're about $9. You should definitely have one. 15 if you go crazy expensive. So, all that being said, there's a few basic rules you have to follow when you first get into woodworking. The very first one, of course, is use the right tools for the right job the right way. And with that comes the obvious requirement that you have to put safety first. And if you don't put safety first, you get something like this, where the obvious problem here is that neither one of them are wearing goggles, and then you don't see proper back support on the gentleman who's supporting the piece of wood. Without that, you're just not being safe. You need to pay attention to that. Someone's getting an echo now. Okay. Measure twice and cut once isn't just a maxim because it's funny. It's because you would be surprised how many times you end up cutting things the wrong way. Keep your tools sharp, and if you don't, your projects won't be sharp. And then actually fucking use these devices. There's these little remove to lock things on almost every power tool nowadays. There's safeties just like you'd find in a gun. Actually use them. I can't tell you how many for since this is a constrained to 10-minute thing, I want to talk about a few basic things, and the one that really comes down is people can cut wood, they can make measurements, and then it's like, what do I do with that? And the short answer is there's joins. So dowel, butt joints, dados, rabbets, lap joints, tongue and groove, miters. I mean, no matter which way you go, the important thing to remember is that half of these are dirty jokes, but they're all actual woodworking joints. If you have just a few dowels, a saw, a drill, a pencil, and some wood glue, you can make a dowel butt joint, and that lets you join pretty much any pieces of wood together. Go over that in just the next moment is how you actually do one of those. And if you really put your mind to it, all of them can really be dirty jokes. So memorize and go forth and impress your friends at bars whenever we get back into those. So I'm not going to beat this to death. I'll happily share the slides, but to make your own dowel butt joint, really all you're doing is creating 2 holes in the middle of the wood, or more if you want a more complex thing. You're drilling holes halfway in, putting a dowel and some glue, clamp them together, and you're done. That's really all it takes to make a very simple and very strong joint. So that's kind of a very simplistic thing, but it doesn't mean that it has to be just that basic. And so if you take a look, some of the heirloom furniture from the late 1800s, they actually specialized in doing dowel joins and with higher quality pieces of wood than the standard woodworking or standard craft dowels you find. And so I wanted to show just this is the basic for how you join things, but what can that really look like? And you can get some really fancy things here. So on the left, you see that's actually a multi-dowel pattern that's being put in that holds the entire piece together and adds some nice accent and flair to it. On the right is actually a little bit more complex technique where the two pieces are joined first by those little slivers of a different colored wood, and then dowels just punch through the whole thing. It goes all the way through the other side, makes an extremely strong bond, and it's extremely attractive as well in terms of presentation. So that was all I really want to talk about for really quick. How do you get into woodworking? But there is a key thing to take away and to remember out of all of this for the fourth time your project doesn't quite go right and you can't figure out what to do with it. And that's that ask for help. There's a huge community out there, just like in the hacker community, of woodworkers who are just constantly on the prowl for new techniques, for new ways to work. There's a lot of parallels actually between the two. And so everything I've learned was from a shop teacher, and after that was just from reading and constantly going like, hey, what if I want to do this? And whether it's the material science of someone saying your wood isn't strong enough to support that particular configuration, or someone saying, did you consider just using a chisel and taking a little bit off that edge? You'd be surprised at how quickly you can go from no capability to making custom boxes with weird joins and all kinds of great effects, and with very little time and investment. So that's all I've got right now. Just wanted to say thanks for having me. Again, I'm Brian. Find me on Twitter at Hermit Hacker, and if there's any questions, happy to answer them. Yeah, so I just finished what I'm calling the bite-sized garden. It's a 16-foot by 16-foot elevated garden in my backyard. Bite-sized because, of course, 16 by 16 gives you 256, so I've got 256 square feet of garden. So I just finished up with that one. I'm also finishing up, actually, I'll be doing the final work on that tomorrow, making a custom bookcase with my son for his stuff, so a 4-foot wide by 3.5-foot tall custom bookshelf. And then been doing a custom jewelry box for my wife, and I just built a table for our deck outside for our back porch, which was a little bit of nothing, but it goes together well. And first thing I built when I got here was an 8-foot by 4-foot utility table for everything in the garage and putting all the tools on and properly mounting them. And it takes about 3 hours to go from a pile of plywood and 2x4s to a fully functioning table with just the exact tools I showed you right there. Yeah, thanks, so.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I have the Debian Discord app installed, and I'm on. Where do I do that? Go live. Yeah. Yep. Okay, and then I can choose which terminal, which screen, the whole screen or just a terminal.
Whatever you like.
I'll do the terminal in the main lobby. Okay, go live. Hello, hello. Okay. Well, I went ahead and installed Pi-hole, and that particular. What is a Pi-hole? A Pi-hole takes the bullshit out of the internet. It's makes the internet less bullshitty. Yes. Yeah, and now that people are using their mobile devices, people are using their tablets, PCs, people are just really connected, and the amount of data that these analytics are out there, gathering matrices and stuff. Well, I went ahead and installed a black hole or a pi hole for my parents, in which my parents are retired, so just to limit the exposure in which my parents can have. And now with scams online, articles, fake news, whatever you call it, they're really going to be exposed to it. And I just really wanted to minimize that, and also just just the likelihood of them getting scammed. Just the less internet footprint that my parents can accidentally click on. Oh, it looked like a login screen, or yeah. It- Yes, it does. It actually does, and in which after I installed it at my parents' house, they noticed that their tablets and their phones aren't using as much power, and also they're getting more battery life. So yes, yeah, yeah, they do. And then there are some sites in which they are paywalled, and they understand that you are behind an ad blocker, and in which they'll less likely get the content which you're looking for. And so that way, so now this is my Pi hole. Is actually running in a VM, and in a VM in which the VM is running inside of a Proxmox host, very similar to vSphere. Um, I have it on my mom's actually old laptop, which is just an old 64, which is a 4 gig RAM and 400 gig hard drive. Nothing much. And so now, it's still running about 15% utilization. And so let me see if I can bring up a browser. Can I switch? How do I switch? Change screen. Mozilla. Okay. Go live. Oh, did I do it right? Cool. Nice. And so HTTP, I'm going to go by IP address for sake of argument. Admin.
Hey Rex, can you also show me why cats are showing me their butts?
Showing butts? Who's showing butts?
There were cats showing butts. I always thought this was just like.
Well, this is my actual internet traffic for the actual day. There has been some spikes around in the morning when I'm waking up. Okay, check here, check there, And now, recently, getting on Discord and all, and getting all this installed, and utilization-wise. So I also have it Pi-hole as a DNS server or a DHCP server, in which all my devices or particular devices have specific IP addresses, such as I have my iPhone, which is a work camera, which is my front camera, my Android, and my Pi radio, and this is my RetroPie running on Linux. So I have that one running on RetroPie. That's a different subject. But in all, it was running on an actual Pi 4. I think I mucked up either OpenVPN or WireGuard, and so I was like, I kind of mucked it up. So I went ahead and disabled the DNS on the actual Raspberry Pi 4, and then I went ahead and switched it over to a Proxmox, just a 2 gig memory, RAM, and 8 gig drive. Nothing much, but just to run it, and all. And so it also has a callback feature where my parents' Raspberry Pi, my sister's Raspberry Pi will actually call back to this one, and where I can SSH into either or and do remote maintenance. And that's because each either my parents' house or my sister's house, their IP addresses can change. Neither so can mine if and or a power outage. My little sister over in Fort Worth, her house is still being built, and their power is getting cut out and in and out, and it gets different IP addresses. So it does SSH callbacks for me. So if I go to the main page, I go to HomeNet. So the last time they SSH back into me was on this past Sunday, 6 a.m. in the morning, and also 4:30 in the morning. They both call back, and that's my RetroPie. That's my RetroPie machine. I just on the EPC, and it calls back. So that way, I know that way I can SSH back and loop back and back into the specific port and get into them. So this particular machine is both my Pi-hole and a callback server, so where I can do remote administration. Remote administration wise, but no, who's on my DHCP list? I went ahead and made a query, just a query to the back to the Pi-hole. Rather than logging into the Pi-hole interface, I can go into a makeshift wiki server, really basic wiki server. So I don't have nothing fancy. So. And if I need to go directly to the DHCP config, I hot linked it so I can configure the DHCP server on the Raspberry Pi. So this particular VM is both a Pi-hole and a callback server, in which I use for helping the family. And of all, my block list I'm using is just only 2, 00 and also host mobile. In all, and it's about 1 million domains on the block lists. And once in a while, either like a Pandora, it'll skip ahead twice for some reason, but ads on Pandora won't come through. That's cool, even on the web version, on the CG or Fire or Mozilla version. I don't have a Hulu. You want to do a Hulu? Okay. I'm just gonna try now. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I haven't tried it on. I also have, like, for my radio out in the living room. I have a OpenELEC running Kodi, which plays music out in the living room. But that's why I don't use Hulu. If I really want movies, yeah, I won't. Yeah, but yeah. And the UI, I mean, I was really impressed on how well the UI is. How you can actually zoom in. Whether or not you can zoom in or just lay out, and almost, But I mean, from there you can see how many different ones it came back. Long-term data. Let's see what's going on in here. Click on a date range. Let's go for yesterday. I only had this one up for about less than 30 days. Yeah, it's not gonna. Yeah, there it is. All my traffic. Yeah, and you're running this query on a Pi. It does take a while. I had just a default install where it's on the SD card, and it does take a while, and depending on how much traffic you have at home. But if you do want to, yeah. Yeah, if you do use Pi-hole, donate to them. Here you go. I'll go ahead and donate. They have a PayPal. You can just quick donate to them. But that's it. Just running Pi-hole at home and doing remote support. You can reach me on Twitter. Let's see, was it Twitter? Twitter Rexer. Oh yeah, a friend of mine. Remember Woody? He just retweeted something about the T-Rex, and not bad, I mean, I can just go casually in a grocery store in the T-Rex, that's my COVID protection, Okay.
Nah, no worries. Can anybody hear me? Am I muted and drunk? All right.
I can see your screen. I don't know if you're drunk though.
All right. Well, I mean, there's a combination of both. So let's... All right, cool. So for most red teamers, we've all come across the situation where we run responder, we capture those net and TLM v2 hashes. We have to crack them, which for us is sometimes very easy with our hash cracker. However, not everybody has a company that is going to fund them $38,000 for a hash cracker. So you're stuck with a DA hash maybe that you can't do much with. So there is an attack vector called SMB relaying. It's not past the hash. I know today on Twitter it's been blowing up with the whole UNC issue on Zoom where people are confusing pass the hash with SMB relay. On Net and TLM v2, you cannot actually pass the hash. You have to crack it or you have to relay it to another SMB server or service on another server. It cannot be relaying to the same system. So I wrote a blog about this a few days ago. It's probably one of the not top 10 blogs, but because I read one today and I was like, crap, I need to up my game. But I wrote a blog about how this is really done. So in the assumption that we've paused your preview. Oh, there you go. In the assumption that you capture a low-level user's password in clear text, or you crack their password. In this case, the user's Rick, and the password is rolling 2020. We pass it to one server. We see the user doesn't have domain admin. We can see that because in crackmap exec, it would give you this pwned output on the right side. So this really sucks for us. So what we end up doing is we look for shares. I sped this up a little bit because the demo gods hate everybody. So I installed CIFS. If you don't know what CIFS is, it's just ability to mount Windows shares to Linux in a very nice way, IFS file system. I mounted that. So one of my machines in my fake lab domain has a home directory set up. So what I did is I have two users, Rick, SVC super admin. I mounted it to my attacker's box, and I can see this SVC super admin I have the ability to read at least into, and I already wrote the file because, again, demo gods. You could do this with a SCF file or a shell command file or a .url file. Chase Dardeman showed me that neat trick. I didn't know you could do that with a .url, but they're essentially the same. Effectively, these are two file format types that when you open up an Windows Explorer and you go into a folder, it will automatically try to load the icon specified within the .url or .scf file. So in this case, I'm specifying my attacker box and then just some fake test icon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in packet ntlm relayx.py. This is the Python 3 version. I'm passing a host file, which the host file contains my other. I only have 2 Windows machines running. It contains the other hosts, my domain controller. My domain controller is running SMB2, and I have to remove mic. It's like drop mic effectively. It was a feature built in by Impacket developers. Don't ask me. I don't know much about that. I'm still learning. But we start that, then we start responder. And from my understanding, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to start responder before NTLM relay X, because responder will effectively hand off the net NTLM v2 hash to Impacket. Impacket will then forward it on to the host that you specify. So on my Windows box, I'm going to visit it, and what you should see is the SAM. If I can click in here, we can see that we've dumped the local SAM hashes. This isn't the DC attack, DC sync attack. This is just a way of Impacket. If you don't specify escalate user, what it will do is dump the local SAM file, which is just the local users. In some cases, this will allow you to win, because this will force it. Let's say the company is using the same local admin, they're not using laps or some other type of randomizer for local admins. You can take this local admin, pass it across a bunch of machines, gain domain admin through LSA secrets, or maybe the domain controller has the same local admin. But in our case, we want more than just the local admin, because I do know it's different. So we do the same, but we're going to do, I already saved this in here, so excuse my, I did, yes. Now I'm struggling, hold on. We're gonna do it this way.
Windows is great.
Windows is great.
Active Directory is a problem.
So I grabbed it so fast because that's just the default path. That's just the default setting if you don't do escalate user on NTLM relay X. If you pass it through SMB, what it's doing is it's just going to dump the SAM system and security high files, decrypt the SAM high files, and dump the local admin hashes. All right. So what I'm doing here is instead of doing the -tf, so I'm not supplying it a file, I'm saying I want to actually, when I receive this hash, what I want you to do is I want you to send this hash in packet to the LDAP port of 10.20.80.71, and I want you to escalate the user's RICS ACLs to have replicate capabilities on the domain controller. Again, we still have to supply SMB2 support and that remove mic if they're supporting SMB. Again, yeah. Yep, 100%. Yep. So you cannot prevent this. The only way to prevent this is to actually set on signing capabilities for your domain controllers and all of the servers. The problem is that there are so many systems or so many companies that are using outdated or legacy systems that they cannot have SMB2, and they cannot have SMB2 plus signing, because then they just screw up their legacy and deprecated systems. So by design or feature, Windows does automatically try to load the icon file. You can do it with SCF, URL. I don't know of any other extension file format that will do it. You don't have to open the file, which is the greatest part about it. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to go to my Windows test box here. I'm going to hit refresh. And what you should see is it's going to say ACL. Oh crap! I already did the ACL attack. There we go. So it succeeds as this SVC super admin, because hypothetically, and I legit did this on a test last week, they were mounting their Isilon file NAS shares to Linux systems that were then also attached to Windows systems. I put this SCF file on all of these other systems, and I was just hoping and praying that somebody with higher rights than me would eventually view their home file system, which did happen. And so what happened is in this instance, SVC superadmin viewed their home directory, didn't click on the file or anything like that. That's why I put that ampersand in the front of it, because it ranks higher in the files, in the file tree in Windows Explorer usually, if you don't have it auto filter like last modified date, etc. It finds those privileges and it modifies the ACLs of the user to have this beautiful ACL, which is replication get changes all. Privileges on the domain. Now, here's the thing that gets most people. They think they can run crackmap exec and they're going to obviously be an enterprise admin. That's not the case. In fact, you're not an enterprise admin. What you have is some special rights on the domain controller that allows you to use the DC sync attack, which effectively means you can dump the ntds.dit file. If I can secret, there we go. You get to dump the ntds.dit file of your domain controller. And my password. And you'll see I don't have many users tied to this. And if you want to crack them, feel free. They're all about the same. Or they're a troll, one of the two. Yeah, I mean, you can crack that too if you want. But so what we could do here, since you're not a DA, you're not an EA, you can make yourself a DA and EA with one of these hashes by passing it, or you could just, use the hash and actually pass it, right? Which is a lot smarter. If you're trying to be quieter, DAs are going to log into other servers, so it's not going to be as noisy. And most people aren't going to have a Splunk rule that says, is a DA logging into server X? But they do have logs or alerts or rule sets that will say, did a group get, or did a user just get added to domain admin or enterprise admin? However, let's say you do want to be responsible and you want to clean up after yourself, because we're all responsible people here, right? aclpwn.py. There we go. You have to, so this was created originally for Spectre Ops's Bloodhound, ACL Pwn. They added functionality to restore the user's ACL rights so that you're not leaving the client in a bad state. They then backported that to a Python script so that for in-packet usage, you can do the same. The number one thing here is you always want to restore the user back, because most companies will never catch the fact that replication get changes all permissions were added to a user ever. So unless they're checking the GUID and actually alerting off of that, which I highly doubt. I haven't come across it yet. So what we want to do is we actually want to restore it and then pass the hash and live off the land. But in order to do that, you use this tool called aclpwn.py. You pass it the Python script and you do it correctly. That would probably help. I think it's just dash restore. Or is it dash restore? There we go. You'll notice when you do this, you actually need the password or the hash of SVC superadmin. Well, you didn't have it in the first place. You didn't have it because you didn't see it in responder like you normally did. And it was just passed through in-packet. In-packet then used it to log into LDAP. So one thing that you can do, since you dumped out nts.dit anyways, you can just copy and paste that bad boy there, and then you're good. So now if I do this with Rick again, rolling 2020, I don't have the ability to actually dump nts.dit at all. So this is just a way for red teamers to stay a little quieter, use responder along with in-packet, and be very targeted to who you want to go after, especially if you know who the DAs are, the EAs are, the help desks who have access to maybe the LAPS user group. So then you can gain the access to LAPS passwords, which will give you the local admin on all those machines, and live off the land for ages. I have yet to be caught using this method. I have been caught multiple times adding a DA or EA, and we do it just to see if they catch it, but most of the time they will. But I have never seen anybody catch that right being added to a low-level user, even though all of the data is out there for them to actually do that. Any questions for me? I know that was trial by fire. I'm just excited everything worked somewhat, except for my lack of remembering flags. So the dot restore file is generated by Impacket. I don't know about Bloodhound. I've seen it used once, and it caused panic mode in a company, and so I've never used it. I've always been more terminal based and Impacket based. So Impacket will automatically create the dot restore for you. No worries. Let me know if you guys need anything.
That is correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make sure that y'all can see my screen because I don't Discord whatsoever. And better question, can you hear me? Oh, shoot. Oh, you know what? Let me just do my entire screen. How about now?
See a nice cobblestone street.
What about a PowerPoint?
The PowerPoint full screen mode doesn't seem to work.
Damn it. All right, let's, you know what? We'll Bill O'Reilly it and just do it live. How about now? Do you see my PowerPoint? It's loading. We'll see here.
The anticipation.
I know. See, the demo gods really are just screwing with me because they're just like, we're going to go ahead and let the last presentation go.
Occasionally, the change source button doesn't work well, so try restarting your stream.
All right. I can do that.
Everybody else just close it.
All right, let's try this again. All right, how about now?
Still loading.
I wonder if Catalina's screwing with me right now with the security preferences. To be honest, this is the first time I've tried to share anything. Go for it. Sounds good, and I'll rejoin in just a second.
Oh, it finally worked.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Kyle, try it again.
All right, I think this might work now.
Hey.
Ah, I know how to internet. Now, is it showing the full screen or the preview on the left-hand side too? All right, well, let's just go ahead and get this started. So thanks again for letting me chat. Real quick, who the hell is Kyle? Well, this is me. That's not me on the photo. That's my awesome dog, Oliver. I'm a cloud security shaman, at least that's what I call myself. I also do some involvement with OpenSOC.io. We hide ourselves in the Blue Team Village at DEF CON every year. awesome capture the flag for defenders. And I'm also a SANS instructor. So I do cloud security architecture and operations, and I teach cloud security. And I want to talk about the fundamentals of cloud security, since a lot of us are probably working from home. If you're not, what the hell are you doing? And a lot of us may also be looking to on-ramp resources to the cloud. And I just kind of want to talk about a little checklist of things to consider when you want to move to the cloud. So quick concepts, what the hell are cloud services? So if you were to ever look at a diagram, there's different services such as infrastructure as a service, platform, and software as a service. The importance of these are who's responsible for what. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room and folks say, oh, I have a server running in the cloud, so it's being patched for me. That's not accurate. So here's some examples of infrastructure as a service and platform and software. We probably all use Office 365, which is now rebranded to Microsoft 365 to make things even more confusing, but hey, that's all right. All the way to infrastructure as a service. That's as traditional as infrastructure can be. These are virtual machines, be it Red Hat, Windows, Server 2008, 2012, Ubuntu, you name it. Infrastructure as a service is the most common adopted model, especially if you've heard the term lift and shift in your organization. And here's a pretty little graphic that I like to point out. This was actually created by Azure, Microsoft. And so this is a good frame of reference for if you need to display, hey, who is responsible for doing what when moving to the cloud? As you notice on the left, on-premise, that's primarily your responsibility, almost 100%. When we move over to software as a service, such as Office 365, that moves the majority to the service provider, such as Microsoft, including patch and upgrades, network controls, and et cetera. But you'll notice with infrastructure as a service, again, your traditional lift and shift, we're going to be responsible for patching and upgrades. We do have some control of network controls, and we are responsible for OS protection, such as your intrusion detection and response, host-based IDS, host-based IPS systems, any AV, those are going to be on you for you to take control of. So I like using this as a reference for when we do want to move to the cloud. Highly recommend checking it out. So first and foremost, I am a blue teamer at heart, so I love all the logs. Give me all the logs. I am selfish like that. I'll tell my vendor management team, hey, I want to ingest these more many logs, so here's a bill for $4.5 billion. I'm kidding that it costs that much, but might as well, right? So what log services do we have when we move to AWS? So CloudTrail is like the who, what, where, when, and how. I wish it would tell me why, because then that would just solve so many problems I would have and reduce the amount of interactions that I have to have. And for those that are responsible for maybe like an IDS or IPS or want to understand the net flow, or if you're in an investigation and you're like, hey, where's my PCAP? Well, that changes when we move to the cloud, and I'll talk a little bit more, but again, I'm trying to condense a 45-minute talk into 10 minutes here. VPC flow logs give us what we call north-south net flow monitoring. So anything that is coming in and out of our cloud, we have visibility of. It's more of just like a TCP dump outlet, like here's the source IP, here's the destination, here's the source port, desk port, how many bytes were transferred. It doesn't really give us a context of like a PCAP that we'd want. Fortunately, there's VPC traffic mirroring. And I recommend if you're like, I want to submit traffic to a packet capture solution, look up VPC traffic mirroring. And then CloudWatch. CloudWatch is pretty neat because we can create metrics, or kind of like a haphazard SIM if we wanted to. If we wanted to alert on when an event happened, we can do that. And we'll talk about specific events to look for in a few moments. So this is what a CloudTrail log looks like. Super fancy. It's a JSON object notation object, which is great. Reason why it's so awesome is because it makes log parsers just take this in with ease. And it's also very easy on the eyes. I don't know about you, but I don't like to look at logs that are unformatted. So JSON makes this much easier for us. And as you can see, we have the who here at the top, which is IAM user, the what and when. So it gives us a timestamp, what they did, and what user agent they used. Now, this is the part where I kind of zoom in, but actually, I think I can zoom in. Aha, technology. So user agents are tracked, and this is great for threat hunters, because if you have user agents that aren't commonly interfacing with your cloud environment, that might be a sign for you to look further down the rabbit hole. However, I will also say, in a production environment of about 400 accounts, you could come across about 20 or so different user agents. And what's also nice about this is that everything that is done in the cloud is an API call. So if you have a user clicking through and creating resources, even if it's multiple API calls, those are going to be logged for us to review. So here's this is usually a slide that indicates that I'm going to tell you a story of when I really goofed up. However, for the sake of time, find me at the next conference, we'll have a beer, and I'll tell you about one time I really, really goofed up. So how do we get all these logs to a SIM or a log analytics tool? One thing that I've found that works really, really well is centralizing CloudTrail logs. And the reason why this works so well, imagine if you have 400 or 500 accounts. If you're responsible for creating content or creating ingestion pipelines for your SIM, do you necessarily want to create 400 or 500 separate inputs to that SIM? Your answer should be no. That would drive me nuts. And in fact, it has driven me nuts. That's why I was like, you know what? Centralizing CloudTrail logs is so much easier. What this allows us to do is configure CloudTrail to send these logs to an S3 bucket, which is kind of like an object store. Not kind of, it is an object store within our security account. And there's more reasons why I recommend that we send it to a security account, because we can do so many different role-based access control policies around it, along with lifecycle controls, and along with encryption and versioning. But what this allows us to do is tell our SIM, all right, set up these inputs, point it to the buckets that are in our account, and then whenever you stand up a new account, configure CloudTrail to send those logs to our bucket. So now I'm not worried about how many accounts are created or removed. I know that the logging will get sent to our security account, and it'll be automatically ingested by our tools. This is awesome, especially when I'm at a conference and I hear, oh yeah, we stood up 15 new accounts. Great, logging's already enabled. This can be anything. This is agnostic, actually. You could be using Graylog, Splunk, Logic Monitor, ArcSight, if you want to, use ArcSight. Really what you're doing is you're pointing the ingestion to the S3 bucket, and then just set the source type as JSON, and it'll ingest. Because what's also nice about CloudTrail logs is that we have our account ID. You'll see this at the very bottom. The account ID is appended to every log, so we're able to sort by that as well if we're doing massive ingestions from a single input. And believe it or not, this is actually a supported method through AWS. There are ways to do it with Azure, but for the sake of time, we'll fast forward. Now, another question I hear a lot is, hey, what should we look for? Here's a not all-encompassing list of API calls we should look for, but it's, hey, is someone using the root user? Why would we want to look for root user activity? Well, one, they have God rights. They can do anything. However, we do not have any user attribution. It'll just say the root user performed X, Y, and Z. We won't necessarily see that Kyle in marketing or Mark the intern or Ali the person did the thing. So this is why we want to monitor for this, because root accounts, we should just put multi-factor authentication in it and use it as a firefighter role. Also looking for things such as multi-factor authentication being disabled, Cloud Trail being disrupted, activity performed in uncommon regions. One of the tenets of cloud computing is broad global access. What this means is that we could stand up resources literally anywhere in the globe. In the AWS console or Azure console, I could easily deploy an infrastructure that spans all of the continents. So I recommend, if you know you only do business or stand up resources in a particular region, get notified for when you have resources stood up in a region you don't normally work in. So I'll post a link to other API calls to look for on my Twitter. So if you want to follow me there, those are other good ideas to look for. Azure activity logs, same thing as CloudTrail. We're able to centralize Azure activity logs using what they call an event hub. And so we only have a single point of ingestion for Azure activity logs. Again, for the sake of time, let's continue. So continuous compliance. How can we continuously be compliant? That's a fun word. I love when I hear compliance and audit, but you know what? It makes our lives a lot easier. So the beautiful thing about the cloud, you may have heard of shadow IT in your careers. If you haven't, it's that crusty old box in the corner that no one has no idea what's going on with it. But if you press the power button, for some reason, all of the lights turn off in the building. Shadow IT is dangerous, but what we want to do is eliminate that risk. And fortunately, when we move to the cloud, because of all the generous API calls we can do, we can easily do an asset inventory. However, the next problem comes. Modern solutions come with modern problems. I have seen individuals create accounts with their own debit card or credit card and start spinning up resources in there. Now I hear you all just high-fiving your face right now, also known as a face palm, like, why the hell would someone do that? Well, I'm going to assume the best of everyone and not say it was from malicious intent, but it's also a risk. And the risks are there's no data governance that we may have in place. There's no security controls that we may deploy to all of our accounts. And if you want to put your tinfoil hat on and think the world's going to end, just insert any doomsday scenario you might be able to think of. So how can we eliminate these issues or be continuously compliant or verify that our resources are following best practice? Well, within AWS, we have AWS config, which allows us to do asset record keeping, so to speak. What's also nice is that now we can aggregate all the findings from all of the accounts we have into a single account. There's also an awesome open source tool called Prowler by my friend Toli Di La Fuente, also known as Tony Blix. It's a command line tool that will actually interrogate an account and look to see how it pairs to the CIS benchmarks. If you haven't heard the CIS benchmarks, they're a really good starting point for locking down services that you're using, even Kubernetes, Azure, AWS. They all have CIS benchmarks to follow to kind of start your hardening efforts throughout your organization. What's also nice too is it can do GDPR and HIPAA. My favorite functionality, you could do digital forensic readiness. So it's kind of doing a gut check on, okay, if something bad were to happen in this account, could we do forensics? And it'll say yes or no. A lot of them fall in line with the CIS benchmarks, but then there's some additional checks that aren't necessarily in like a compliance framework, but just good ideas to consider. Security Monkey, not only the coolest name ever, but a really great tool. However, it's been deprecated by Netflix and no longer supported. However, as all awesome open source tools come to fruition, the community will support it. It was created by Netflix and it monitors AWS, Google Cloud, and OpenStack. What was beautiful about this tool though, is that if it found something that was like, hey, this is not a great idea, you can actually justify it and squelch that alert. Therefore, you can reduce the signal to noise ratio and create a risk index for your organization. So I am kind of out of breath. I've had a couple beers and I have my dog in my lap. But identity and access management, one of the biggest issues I say that I discover when working with folks when it comes to the cloud. The reason why is because they'll spray local users everywhere and there's no user lifecycle management. So there's this thing called what I call the switch role method, but it's also known as role assumption. What this allows us to do is use like Azure Active Directory or Ping ID or Auth0, Okta, you get where I'm getting at here, to be a single source of identity and authorize individuals to accounts. Now, in this diagram that I have here, this is a role that allows security to assume the security role in all of the accounts that we may have to perform incident response or investigations. But what's nice about this is if we work our way on the outside in, it all stems from a single source that makes auditing a lot easier. Again, a conversation I could drill into the ground in almost like 6 hours a day. If you want to talk more about that, I'd be more than happy to. Best practices. It's 2020. Put MFA on it. Put MFA on your root account. Sometimes there's use cases where you need to have a local user make a password so they might not be using your single sign-on solution. Make sure they have MFA on it. And make sure you have a password policy that's applying to that if you do. Federate your identity where you can. If you have a single sign-on solution, use it. And then also see that you have a user lifecycle policy in place. Leveraging tags. Tags are a way to identify resources. So you could say, okay, so this service account belongs to this team, but we just found out that a team member has left that organization and no longer has access. We're going to force them to rotate the key. And we could also do this through automation. And then a final punch list, strategize logging. Make sure that your IR teams and investigation teams have the appropriate access. Nothing worse than an incident response taking place and all your analysts can do is just watch the fire on the other side of the glass, just like, well, just let it burn. Have a continuous compliance solution. There's a new term to it called the Cloud Security Posture Management Platforms, CSPM for short. This will allow us to do asset inventory and look at configurations on how they adhere to either best practices such as the CIS benchmarks or regulated requirements like HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2, ISO 27001, and automation. Oh my gosh, I cannot stress automation enough. With the cloud, we can scale. With scalability, we can scale problems too. If we don't have security controls automated, we're going to be falling behind where we want to be ahead of the game. And last but not least, fortunately, no one's around to throat punch me when I say this. Get to know your development teams because we want to understand what they're putting into the cloud so we could help them secure it. And with that, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to hit me up on the Twitter sphere. I'm also on Discord now because YOLO. But thank you again for having me. Glad I was able to jump in.
Make it sound like it's something really special. I just don't want to show my personal chats on recording.
No, but I keep forgetting the name of CyberArk when it comes to mind. I'm like, there's a password randomizing. Yeah. I'm like, well, people ask me all the time, like, I know a few. Oh, what's the name? I don't know.
Beyond trust, psychotic.
Hey, hey. I didn't say I was the smartest person. No, your name's down now.
Thank you.